we're absolutely delighted to have Susan Greer um, at this first webinar for 2026. Um, she's going to talk about what is natural burial and where it is available in Ontario, um, and including some exciting initiatives that have been moving forward this month in to create a dedicated natural burial ground in Simcoe County, which is northwest of Toronto. And Susan is the executive director of the Natural Burial Association, which is a volunteer organization that is, and this is from their website, uh, dead set on facilitating the creation of a natural burial grounds in Ontario. So, if there's anything more to say, I will let Susan say it herself, and I turn it over to you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Susan. I'm going to share the screen here. And then I've got my presentation already. I'm going to go to full slides. Slideshow. Can everybody see that? Okay,
Yeah,
good to
yeah.
go. Alrighty. Okay. It's exactly what Judy said about what we're going to be talking about, and I'll keep on letting people in while I'm at it. Um, yeah. What's natural burial? Where it is? Little details about it. Common questions that are asked, concerns, and then lots of time for Q&A. And I'm going to skip over the video just because we're behind schedule here. Everything that I cover is in the video. So just a little bit about our organization, elaborating on what you just heard. Yes, we're all volunteers, and our goal is to help, facilitate the creation of natural burial grounds. We actually had no intention of being in the biz, so to speak, but then some crazy stuff happened, so we are actually now in the biz. But what we're trying to do is knock down all of the barriers that are not only in the way of natural burial, but are in the way of the best kind of natural burial. So starting with, and this is getting less and less, but it was that there's not that many people that knew about natural burial. So we started like, at least 5 years ago, more than that, building awareness. In Ontario, there's this fee. I can't remember whether I get into it later or not. It's called the Care and Maintenance Fund fee. Every time you purchase a plot, whether it's cremation or full body burial, 40% of it goes into this perpetuity fee. It's the highest, craziest percentage, bar none, in all of North America. So we're trying to get that fixed for natural burial. Communities across the province, they might reach out like, I'd like to have a natural burial in Muskoka. And so I put everybody who writes in from Muskoka together, and then I can give them kind of like a toolkit so they can hit the ground running. Not everybody has to learn about natural burial from square one. And then the other thing we're trying to do is nudge the industry. There are some absolutely beautiful, beautiful, beautiful individuals that work in the industry, both on the cemetery side and the funeral home side. And then there are those that are pretty stuck in their ways and not very happy with what we're doing. So we're trying to nudge them along. Every Anglophone funeral director who is licensed. They've come through Humber College, which is in Toronto, and now we've created a video that's part of their curriculum. I'm just worked all morning because we're getting another video together. When I say we, it's with like lovely volunteer funeral directors who are helping me out on shroud burials, because we're finding again in Ontario, there's a couple funeral homes who are refusing to do that. So those are the kind of things that we do. So we don't just have natural burial in a name, but we actually have it like beautifully facilitated from start to finish. And I'm going to get into grave renewal later on in this presentation. So what is natural burial ground? Not natural burial. Um, I kind of distinguish between what's above ground and what's below ground. I'll start with below ground. We're buried in a biodegradable casket, or a shroud. So it could be a willow casket, it could be a pine casket. It's just natural. It's not the hardwood, metal, varnished caskets that we often see. And a shroud, of course, is like 100% linen or cotton. You can even use your bed sheet as long as it's cotton. The grave depths is 3.5 feet. That's because that's where the rich soil strata is. That's where the mycelium is. That's where the earth is so appreciative of of the nutrients and energy our body is giving back to the earth. We're not embalmed, or if we are, it's certainly not using formaldehyde. There, for instances where they really want to have the deceased embalmed, there are some more gentle chemicals. And of course, there's no vault. A lot of cemeteries have bylaws indicating that you have to have a vault uh, surrounding the casket. And so that already takes place. It's taken place in time immemorial. It still takes place now, particularly in Muslim and Jewish cemeteries. What, when we use in the vernacular natural burial, it means today is what's done on top of the deceased. The land is restored and protected in its natural ecohabitat. And tombstones, there are no tombstones. If they are, they're very, very modest. Stone, probably pulled right from the cemetery. But there's usually a communal marker, like there could be boulders that have the names of the individuals that are buried there. Or legally, you have to be able to tell a loved one where the burial, the grave is. And so it's always at least, GPS at a minimum can be done. But the idea is that when you look at a natural burial ground, you're looking at a meadow or a forest. You'd never know it was a cemetery unless you knew it was a cemetery, if that makes sense. What it's not, as I said, this is not new, not new. Always the settlers did it, the indigenous did it. It's not new at all. It's not engineered, like it's the only option we have at end of life that's natural. And, we're left up in the hands of Mother Nature. And it's not to confuse things that new technique coming down the pipeline, which is, also industrial, and that's human composting. So this is my favorite page of the presentation because when I first heard about this, honestly, I just was listening. I was home at sick and listening to CBC, and somebody on the radio was talking about natural burial, and the light bulb just went on. I thought that is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. I'll phone the Toronto Planning Department. I'm sure they'll have one in a couple of months. Here we are, 8 years later. But I was motivated because of its environmental benefits. And what has been the most humbling and beautiful part of this work that I've done is learning about all the reasons that people like natural burial, and some of them have nothing to do with the eco-friendliness of it. These are there's we if you go to our website, we have these beautiful quotes. I call it fan mail that people write in, but a couple of these just move me beyond belief. What better way to honor what nature has given me than to give myself right back? And the thought of allowing my body and soul to rest among nature makes me feel less sorrowful about dying. So this is that's like our payment. We don't get paid for our jobs, but that fan mail is what keeps us going. So yeah, the many reasons is yes, because of the eco-friendly nature, the reciprocity, the idea that we've taken from Earth all through life, and now we have a chance to give back. It does align with many people's faiths and traditions. They like the idea. It's just comforting for people to know that their final resting place is in nature with all of these, wildflowers and bees and butterflies and everybody above them as with the pollinator gardens. It's part of the cycle of life. It's leaving a legacy of nature for future generations and also a nice place for everybody to visit. And just the sheer simplicity, but almost more than anything else, we hear it just makes sense. There's no contrivances to it. It's natural. It's the way it's always been. So, liked in that regard. Um, and then the other interesting thing you might be thinking, oh, but this is only for tree huggers. Not at all. This is males and females, more or less equally, like the idea of natural burial. When we ask them, would you consider it? And by age, younger people are a little bit more. open to the idea. The older we get, they're maybe already made up their mind about cremation or, don't like to think about it. But and here's the neat thing. Again, if you're thinking, oh, this doesn't appeal to everybody, we asked people, this was before the second last provincial election, and we asked people who they were voting for. And so, even the majority of conservatives who you might not think would be interested would consider a natural burial. So that's like, I think, a beautiful thing that it's not just a marginalized offering. It's got a broad appeal. This is probably the most boring page of this presentation. This is with the vocab lesson. People ask the difference between green burial and natural burial. There is no difference at all. I'm really, really a stickler, and it looks like the whole industry, by and large, is getting on this bandwagon as well, as of calling it natural burial. And the reason is it's accurate, it is natural. But the other thing is that green connotates an environmental movement, and green can alienate people who are sick of the whole woke thing. And we've actually had a couple people write in and say, thank you for calling it natural, not green. So if you are talking about this, I hope you will also pick up in the vocabulary and refer to this as natural burial. The other thing is it's kind of frustrating because there's no clear definitions, certainly legal definitions. So it does kind of vary from country to country and organization to organization. But there's two kinds of natural burial grounds. Hybrids are the small sections that are eked out of conventional burial grounds. They can be as small as a quarter of an acre or as large as the largest one in Ontario now is 2 acres. There's varying degrees of greenwash, but those are hybrids. A dedicated site, and we know again from that same poll that we did, which is what most people would prefer, are those sites that are just a natural burial ground. And I'll talk about them a little bit more. There's hundreds of them in the US and in the UK. We're so far behind in Ontario. So here's a map that shows you where the natural burial grounds are around the southern tip of the province. And the dedicated site that I'm going to refer to later on is right here in Oro Medonte. There's Barrie. So you can see that there are quite a number of natural burial grounds, and the ones that are not filled in, those are the ones in the works. And there's even more than that. Sometimes I'm not at liberty to put them on, but there are other ones in the works there. Just to give you a couple examples, Glenwood is in Picton. It's the only woodland forested natural burial ground in all of Ontario. So beautiful. The day I visited, there was a deer staring at me. It was really, really lovely. Union Cemetery in Cobourg. You can see in the background the tombstones. There's the conventional end, and right at the back of it, beyond the circular road, they've created a natural burial section. It's a father and son team. They dig the graves by hand, pull out the invasives by hand. And behind there is conservation land. So it really feels like you're in nature. Cobourg was the first one in Ontario. And a new one just launched in Hamilton. Yeah, it's small, 800 meters. So that, just showing that this is a municipal one. So the municipalities are involved as well. Now, I was talking about dedicated natural burial grounds. We only have one open to the public, modern day natural burial ground right now in all of Canada. And that is in the Gulf Islands and BC. And you can see there Kathy and Gavin. They have this really beautiful farm. You turn onto their property, and it's a lovely, long, winding road. You pass their animals, you pass their crops, you pass their house, and then it starts to go up. You leave your car, and it goes up, and it goes into what you can see there, like the deepest, darkest, beautiful, beautiful Douglas fir forest. And there they have 13 acres, which they've turned into a natural burial ground. It's just so beautiful. They are worldwide. Um, Larkspur, Tennessee, they have a relationship with the local land trust. If you can believe it, can you imagine this ever happening in Canada? But in the UK, they have a natural burial ground within a public park, like within a national park. So amazing. Duck Run Cemetery in Virginia. It's got a pond. There's a beautiful story about um, a little boy was coming. His mother wanted him to come back and see his father, who had recently died in a motorcycle accident. And he was like, "Well, I'm not going to get out of the car. I'm not coming. I don't want to do this." And they eventually did coax him out of the car, and he got his fishing rod and he was at the pond and he was fishing, and then I guess the pond is lined by a whole bunch of little stones or pebbles, and he took one, and then they went to visit his dad and he left the pebble there, and he keeps on saying to his mom, "Now can I go, let's go back, let's go visit dad." And then they go and they fish and he gets another pebble and it keeps on adding up to the pile of pebbles. So beautiful things that happen there. And here's another one in Wisconsin, I think. And some of them they have volunteer teams that dig the graves and there's a story in Prairie Creek, a lovely cemetery in Florida, where at first they're all nonprofit, so there's never a lot of money, and they were relying on um, prisoners who were on the probation period after prison to dig the graves. And then one family who was burying their loved one heard that that's what happened. And they said, "Well, we'd like to be involved in this." And so before you know it, like there was so much interest just in preparing the grave that they have a gosh, I forget the name of it. There's t-shirts if you've done 5 graves, like picking the picking something. Volunteer team, and then a local poet heard about this and she created a poem, and so now the team gets together and they dig the grave and they all stand around for, and then they don't know the deceased, and recite that poem before they leave, and then the family comes. So like hopefully you're all touched by these little stories. So, yes, Jesus was referring earlier to the dedicated natural burial ground that we're launching in Simcoe County. So, and you hopefully you remember back to the map where it is north of Barrie. It's 95 acres. It was farmland, not great farmland. We would never buy like great farmland. Even if we could, we wouldn't. But the property kind of goes out of the range of where you can see here, and then there's a barn I'll refer to in a second, and it goes along. And this is like a big, maybe like 20% of it, 25% of it is beautiful forest, most of it protected by the Conservation Authority, which is lovely. And then there's 2 fields here, and then through here, which will be the burial area. And down here, this is where the dairy was kept. There were 48 cattle that were kept in this, and that's been converted to office space and a gathering spot. But we're hopeful that, unless it's really inclement weather, this is all about connecting people to the land, so that we hope that most of the burials are intimate number of people, graveside, not, we don't want this to become party central here. And then there's a manure pit, and that manure pit is being converted to the equipment storage area for the mini excavator and all the other tools that are needed. So trying to do it as eco-friendly as we possibly can. And those are a couple pictures from our walks there at various times of the year. Oh, you're probably going to ask when it's going to open. We're saying 2028, summer of 2028. It's really hard to tell. The approval process in the province is mind-boggling. Um, and one of the things about natural burial that, when I was describing natural burial, it's not officially a tenant, so I didn't mention it, but really is a part of it. At the natural burial grounds, like the hundreds of them in the States and in the UK, and Kathy out on Salt Spring Island, the cemetery operator is involved, like because it's all about, helping the family see their loved one in the context of the web of life, in the context, the cycle of life, death. And Larkspur in Tennessee, JC, the guy who runs it, he tells that lovely story about a family who came and they were there because their mother had died. And he said, "Would you like to be involved in the digging of the grave or the decorating of the grave or the filling in of the grave?" They're like, "No, no, 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 no. We're just here because mom likes nature. No, no, no." And he knew better. And so when they arrived with their mother, he had all the shovels out, he had cedar boughs ready, he had flowers ready. And then when they're there, they get it, and they involve themselves in, preparing and lowering and covering their loved one. And we're so grateful after that. So that's part of it is trying to the cemetery operators, they stay around. It's not that situation you might have seen if you've gone to a conventional burial where you can see the guys with the backhoe just off, like waiting for the family to leave so they can fill in the grave. It's not like that at all. um in case you were going to ask these questions, I'll table them. The biggest questions that we get are, will it poison the water? No. Like any diseases that we have, the pathogens in our body, they die when we do, except for there's some very rare diseases, in which case you're not allowed to be buried at any rate. Like the mad cow disease. I have a hard time pronouncing the Jacob Creutzfeldt, that disease. And then, they need a carrier to transmit them. It's just not there. So as well, there are so many safeguards. Whoopsie. Um, there's so many safeguards in place. We had to do really extensive hydrogeological studies before we got approved for cemetery zoning in the case of our site in Simcoe County. So it's very, very regulated and very, very safe in that regard. People wonder because they're just so kind of used to the 6 feet under because of the TV series, and they think, oh, our scavenger is going to dig up the bodies. They're just not interested in us. They like the smell of things that are familiar to them, and they're not familiar with the human smell, is just not like of interest to them at all. In fact, if you want to get rid of, say, fox or coyotes on your property, um, one guy I know, he goes to the barber shop, gets the hair from the floor and sprinkles that on his property. So there's no worries in that regard, and it's just too deep. It's just too much work. There's just no incidents of scavengers digging up natural burials. Are there winter burials is a big question, and I can't answer, of course, for every cemetery because every cemetery sets its own laws. But there are there are winter burials in Thunder Bay 52 weeks of the year. So there's no reason why there couldn't be winter burials in the cemeteries everywhere in Ontario. Some of the cemetery operators would argue it's way easier to contend with the frost. And the frozen ground that it is with like the mush in the springtime. I think the reason that a lot of the cemeteries don't offer winter burial is, just think of those small local cemeteries. It comes down to budget, and if they just say we're closed over the winter, then they don't have to pay the custodian. So there's that consideration. Also, I heard there was one cemetery where they didn't offer natural burial, and that's because the custodian was elderly and they were worried about his safety. So, there's various reasons why in some of these cemeteries, winter burial isn't offered, in which case the body would have to be stored, usually at an expense, until it can be buried in the springtime. And it would have to be embalmed using the non-formaldehyde chemicals. So that's unfortunate too, because it means that body is that opportunity to give back to the earth is not there. Um, can you find your loved one's grave? Yes, in the instance, like I'll talk about, well, a lot of the natural burial grounds, of course, are like meadowed grass, tall meadowed grass. And I think we all these days take our tick concerns very seriously. And so as we're planning ahead for this natural burial ground in Simcoe, we're hoping that we can really shift people's thinking that the legacy of that loved one is not that 8 by 3 grave. It's all of that meadow, all of that field. Like that's the legacy. And that we will be in our case that as the graves are filled in the back, we will be planting the wildflower seed and restoring the land. And yes, anybody can find out exactly where the loved one's grave, but we're kind of hoping that they don't, that they can find solace from just part of the bigger good. Um, and a question of affordability, of course, is hugely important to everybody. And natural burials is very hard to say again because every cemetery sets its own rules, but it's generally, of course, much less expensive than conventional burial. You don't have that expensive hardwood casket. You don't have to pay for the vault, um, and it may or may not, depending on where you live, be a little bit more than cremation. It all depends on where you are. Sometimes the cremation retort might not be local, and so that's a big expense, in which case natural burial is less expensive. So um, it all depends. I'm not going to get into the pricing strategy for Simcoe, but for those within Simcoe County, we are determined to have affordable burial at the same prices that it is now. So that would be, say, like 1,200 for the opening closing and 1,200 for the interment. Those are the two prices that are always involved in purchasing a cemetery plot. So we really want to keep it as inexpensive as we can. Um, some people ask about is why isn't cremation or is cremation eco-friendly? Because right now it's actually more like after COVID, it's more like 75% of Ontarians opt for cremation. And it is harmful to the atmosphere. It uses fossil fuels and to burn, and it releases lots of carbon into the atmosphere. And if they don't have the latest, greatest, very expensive retort, there's also a lot of other toxins that are emitted in particulates into the atmosphere. The other thing is the cremated remains are actually harmful to the soil and the foliage. If they're sprinkled, they are way too sweet with a high alkaline, and they have a very, very high sodium content. So, for instance, on our site, we won't be permitting scattering, although we will accept the burial of cremated remains more for reasons of accessibility than anything else. Um, And so I'll just do my little bit here so everybody knows. And if you could take a minute to write your MPP. Here's a lovely quote that came in. I'm attracted to the natural beauty of it all, plus no unnecessary bells and whistles that cost so much. Bottom line for my husband and I is we cannot afford to die yet. And so when you die, if you've purchased a plot in a cemetery, whether it's cremation or full body, let's say the price of interment there, like the right to have that plot, is a simple number, $1,000. 40%, so 400 of that has to go into the care and maintenance fund of the cemetery. And it is beautiful that we live in a culture in which we have so much respect for the dead that we do collect for this perpetuity fund. No question about that. But the 40%, I don't know how it got so high in Ontario. There's no other place in North America like that's even close to that. All the Americans, it's like 15%, 10%, the BC 25%. It's just crazy. The national average is 13%, and here we are at 40%. So one of the things that we're doing, we're not in the campaign right now, is we're trying to um, have a little like exception, if you will, in the laws such that for natural burial ground, which of course are so way less expensive to maintain, right? You're not mowing every 2 weeks in the growing season. You're not having to whippersnip around the tombstones. You're not having to worry about tombstones falling over. We're asking that there be a minimum option of 20%. So again, still we believe in the idea of collecting for perpetuity, but we don't want to rob people. The other thing, getting near the end here, is grave renewal. So grave renewal is the idea behind that is that after several decades, depends on the soil, but say 4, 5, 6, however many decades, the grave can be opened. I'm going to describe the way that we're trying to get it done on the Simcoe site. The grave is opened, and if there are any human remains, they are with dignity collected, wrapped in a shroud, and they never ever leave the grave. They just are dug a little deeper. There's questions about if there's say the titanium hip, does that go off for recycling, or is that part of the person and stay with the person? Um, and so that way, then the grave could be prepared and another person could use the grave. And what this means is that cemeteries could always become sustainable because the way that it works in Ontario is that if a cemetery is full or it's abandoned, like if you think of all of those rural churches that have cemeteries beside them and then the congregation leaves, it becomes the responsibility of the municipality. And it's a huge line item for all the municipalities. Like they really have to spend a lot of money taking care of all the cemeteries. And so that's tax dollars, right? So if a cemetery was always sustainable, that would ease the burden on the municipalities. And also just the reality that land is finite. And before you know it, we're all, who want to be buried, we're going to be going up to the Arctic to be buried if we can't, keep on finding land and, of course, affordable land near our homes. So we had, after we got this cemetery in Simcoe, we had an initial meeting with the Bereavement Authority of Ontario in November, and we had hired a lawyer who came up with this really neat way in which we could do it as a test pilot on our site legally. And it's just we're just the Bereavement Authority of Ontario just we were just having a hard time getting them to get back to us. But it's certainly, I think that would be a big, big, big deal. And if we're able to do it on this site, that would help because the politicians, they know that they have to change the legislature. They know that they have to make grave reuse a possibility. I should have mentioned it's already done in Quebec. And so this would kind of open the door for it. But anyway, we're just the government, the BAO is like working at its own pace. So we don't have an update on that one. Yeah, just to let you know, if you want to sign up for updates, generally speaking, stay in touch with the Natural Burial Movement. Here is our website, naturalburialassociation.ca. We're also on Facebook and Instagram, although admittedly not too active these days with all that we're doing in Simcoe. And we have a temporary website until we get our real website going, and that is a natural burial ground in simcoecounty.ca. If you are interested in staying in touch with that particular dedicated natural burial ground and finding out when it's open and all of the details of its creation. So over to you for questions.
Okay, who has questions? Um, I don't see any in the chat. You're welcome to put your questions in the chat if you like. Um, or, okay,
Carolyn,
Carolyn?
Carolyn, you got your hand up there.
Yes, there are a number of places that I've heard about around. One is called Meadowvale, and I think that
Mhm.
may be the
Yep.
Coburg site. And,
Meadowvale, I think that might be the Mount Pleasant Group site in Brampton.
oh, okay. And I heard of another one sort of down Niagara way.
Yep, that's Willow's Rest. That's the biggest one. That's 2 acres. That's in Niagara Falls in a cemetery called Fairview. They're all on that map, the back there. Or if you go to our website, it lists all of the various sites.
Okay, and what about St. John's, Norway in Toronto?
That's not a natural burial ground, no. But something that I should point out too is if a cemetery has bylaws that say you have to have a vault, legally it has to have an area in which you don't have to have a vault. So if you don't have to have a vault, there's no law saying you have to have a hardwood metal casket. There's no law saying you have to have a tombstone. There's no law saying you have to be embalmed. So, in essence, you could have a natural burial at any cemetery. You just won't, the work that I spoke of earlier that happens on top of the deceased with the ecological restoration, that won't take place.
But you don't have to have a vault either.
Every cemetery has to offer a vaultless section.
I see. Okay. So that's probably what was advertised at,
Oh, yeah, all the cemeteries are now saying they offer natural burial. It's like, yeah. But they're not doing the bit because
the restoration
yes,
of the
they're doing the
land.
natural burial down below, but they're not doing anything above. There's so much greenwash in it. It's kind
Got
of
it.
crazy.
Thank you.
Okay, I see a question in the chat from Pat. How quickly can the burial be done after death?
Um, well, that would depend on the cemetery, but it should be able to, like I think you would need, it depends, and it even depends, is the cemetery open every day of the week is one question. The other question is you can't be buried until you get the death certificate or at least a paper. Perhaps it's not officially the death certificate or the coroner's report. There's some paperwork that needs to be done. That's either normally done by the funeral home, except for those people that opt to have a home funeral and take care of all the paperwork themselves. So if the person dies on a Friday, you're not going to get the paperwork until Monday at the earliest. So there's things around the paperwork, but I think now I can only speak for what our goal would be at our dedicated site would be to accommodate people um, to as their wishes. What is interesting is I had thought that we would have to have a limit and say we cannot receive the deceased after X number of days. And what I learned from one of the sites in Ontario is they don't have a limit on it at all. There are ways to take care of the body, to keep it cool, ways to don't like the word store, but protect it, store it, such that it would give time for family members who might be scattered across the country or elsewhere to gather. So I was so happy when I learned that.
Um, okay, and somebody's asking about the Nogies Creek
Oh,
near
yeah.
Bob Cajun.
Yeah. Oh, I haven't spoken to her for so long. I've forgotten her name. She's on a long-term plan to do this. There's nothing that's going to happen right away. It's really, it's, it's shocking. The difference between launching something like this in Canada or on Ontario compared to the United States. There's so much regulatory oversight and so many tests. It costs hundreds of thousands of us just to have the tests done to get approved. And so we're fortunate that we have a benefactor to do this. As of yet, I don't think it's the case with Nogi. So it's really, and there's also an issue with lime there and whether it's like good quality lime that they would need for mining. But I think she's cleared that. So it's it's a good question, and I should have an update, which I don't have right now. But I know she's very keen. It's just a question of whether or not it will ever come, be able to come to fruition with all the hurdles that are imposed in our province.
Okay, and then another question is, what's the situation with natural burials right around Toronto, in and around Toronto?
Hmm. Well, I can't imagine a cemetery right in Toronto ever creating a section for natural burials because they can make so much money from, charging incredible amounts for the casket, for the vault, for the, for the plot. So, um, I can't see that happening. And I live in Toronto too, and I fully anticipate that somebody will be taking my remains outside of the city, if I want to have a natural burial.
Um, okay, can you talk a little bit about home funerals?
Sure. Yes. The laws are very distinct between what is the role of funeral homes and what is the role of a cemetery. And way back when we were, doing interviews and trying to see why people liked natural burial, a lot of people would say, "Well, I really like the idea, like I'd be working with my kind of people." And they were saying that as if they suddenly thought if they were going to a natural burial, they could circumvent the funeral homes. And the only way in which you can do that, and again, I'm not saying anything wrong with funeral homes. There are some beautiful, beautiful funeral directors out there. There are also some funeral homes that refuse to support the natural burial movement, but um, and so if if you didn't want to involve a funeral home, or you can find a funeral home that would let you be a little involved. But let's see, I'm going to use an example of some teacher who died, and they did it all themselves. The husband made the casket. When she died, she was at home for several days. She was on viewing there in the living room. Greg drove her it was in Coburg where they had the burial for her. And presumably they also did all of the paperwork themselves. So it's all of the care of the body and the transport to the cemetery and the paperwork. Um, it's it can be harder than one might imagine to take care of the body. There are death doulas who are sort of somewhat in the middle. They can help out. They can also help out emotionally with the grief before and after. It is like kind of confusing with home funerals. Like, let's say you decide you want to do it on your own, and then you don't want to go through a funeral home because they're so costly, but you need to get your loved one to the cemetery. Uncle Joe has the right kind of vehicle that can take your loved one, but you're not that close to Uncle Joe. You want to pay him, you can't pay him. Once money changes hands, then you're doing everything illegally. Um, so it's tricky in that regard. But I know of many families who have found a friendly funeral home, and then they just kind of work what the family would like to do and what they'd like to do. They borrowed a rolled tray in which to carry their loved one. I think they kept the loved one with the funeral home, maybe at home, but they had some ceremony in their home. So and they escorted the loved one to the cemetery, not the funeral home. So it's a question of finding those funeral homes that are receptive. The other thing that I mentioned earlier, shroud burials. We've run into a couple situations where there was a cemetery creating a natural burial section, and they had in their bylaws that they were going to offer shroud burials, which, as a frame of reference, in British Columbia, where they are ahead of us on natural burials, 80% of the people opt for shroud burial. And the local funeral homes in this town said, well, we're not gonna do shroud burials. So the cemetery changed their bylaws, and now people can't be buried with a shroud. So we're that's why now I'm working with some funeral directors, and we put together this video, and we're just trying to like encourage funeral homes to see how valuable it is for people and why they should offer it. And it's not, they're not going to lose their shirts. And so there's a lot of give and take with the funeral homes. The trick is finding the good funeral homes, or I shouldn't say good. The trick is finding those funeral homes that embrace natural burial and understanding that the market is changing a little bit and people want that flexibility, and they might want to cherry pick what they want and what they don't want, what they'd want to do to care for their loved one on their own, and what they feel more comfortable putting in the hands of the professionals.
Okay, you just answered this one, but I'll ask it again just to make it clearer. What is involved with arranging transportation to where a natural burial can be done?
Yeah. The Um, there's two kinds of funeral homes. There's the funeral homes that have the bricks and mortar. They probably have a, name and son, and they've been around, even though they might actually be owned by a chain. They will look to the public like they're still an independent funeral home. And you can hire them, and they will take the body as desired. There is this other kind of service called a transfer service, and they don't have all the bells and whistles, and accordingly, they don't have the steep costs of the funeral homes. If you, as long as you're in like a real, looks like I can see kind of where everybody is, and I think all of your regions, maybe not Midland, Tracy, would offer this, and it's called the transfer service. So if you Google simple burials or basic burials or basic cremation, they're like in a mall, but you'll never probably even have to go there. The one positive thing about COVID is that a lot of this can be done online now. And so they would be able to arrange those pieces of the journey of the deceased to their final resting place at a much smaller cost than the conventional funeral homes.
And as you already said, you can take the body yourself in your own car or vehicle as long as there's no payment involved.
As
That
long as there's no payment involved. There's other little rules like Greg, the fellow whose wife died of cancer, and they knew that for a long time. Like I was kind of cute when they got married. They had a VW bug, and he'd written on the side of it, "My wife," and kind of had an arrow going up to the passenger seat of this bug. And then she died, and he either still had a bug or got a bug, and had my wife on the passenger side and then the arrow, but there was the casket that he'd made in the back seat. And I said to him, yeah, well, good thing, like good thing the cops didn't catch you, because you're actually, the word dignity is looms large in the industry, and they're like, you would have got caught for exposing the casket. And he just kind of said to me, like, what kind of cop is going to stop me from that? So fair enough. Some rules are made to be broken.
right.
Yeah, I mean, and it is like it is, the industry would say it's absolutely undignified and horrific that a family might want to take somebody in a pickup, but other people will go like that, that's beautiful, right? So beauty and dignity is in the eye of the beholder. It's like it's kind of scary how they use this term as a truncheon to in the industry.
Um, okay, and then we're asked about the situation in Ottawa. So
Huh.
I'll let you speak to that.
Okay,
Uh,
well, unmute yourself, and if I'm not, because I don't know what if there's like a situation, but there is yeah, you guys are so lucky. There's this funeral co-op, I think it's called Ottawa Funeral Co-op. They're two of the funeral directors that have been so helpful with this shroud burial we put together. They're amazing. They are just so uh, so mindful of listening to the family and delivering to the family's needs. They're fantastic. And then there is nearby the Ottawa Valley Green Burial Society, equally like absolutely amazing, like volunteer team that have got together and they had hoped to get a dedicated site, but it's just a crazy goal. Um, and so they have formed call it a partnership or what have you with a cemetery in Loxley, and they offer natural burial there. So they're absolutely beautiful. You could Google them, Green Burial, um, Ottawa Valley Green Burial Society. They're amazing. And so, yeah, it just seems to be a pretty progressive, um, market there. And it's the kind of thing, and they'll also go far. Like Lisa and Kevin at the funeral co-op there, they regularly will take the deceased as far as Picton. Somebody wants to be buried in the woods. So, they're really involved in natural burial and they're very receptive to doing the shroud burial.
Uh,
Wish there were more of them. They're just, yeah, they're lovely.
Shout out to the funeral co-op, and I'll be saying this later, but we have a representative from the funeral co-op to speak to the FAMS AGM uh, coming up in a couple of months.
Oh, excellent. Yeah.
Um, it,
Yeah,
it,
that's right, Judith. I forgot you were involved with that. So good thing I said nice things. Yeah. No, it really it is a very it's just beautiful there.
and it is Green Burial Ottawa Valley is the I think the formal name for
You're
the
right. You're right. Right.
for them. And there's several groups in Ottawa that are also working toward natural burials. And so stay tuned. And when anything happens, it will be in the FAMS newsletter.
Yeah, and we have like there's you saw the map earlier where we showed where they were, and on our website there's a listing, and there's lots of groups that are working behind the scenes. Like I use Muskoka because it's that seems to be the one where I'll every couple of weeks I'll get another email from someone in Muskoka. Hey, can you hook me up with that team there that's working for the natural burial ground in Muskoka, and they're advocating, and it's always different. Like some will go to a private cemetery and try to have something there. Others will go to the municipality. Muskoka's looking really hopeful. It looks like their municipality is like really, really open-minded to it. And then there's one in Thornbury where that dear lovely team there has been like pushing for years and they know where it's going to be. And I forgot the name of the cemetery. And it is just like so held up in bureaucracy. It's just so sad. So it all depends from region to region. There's just no roadmap that one can follow. But if you live in a region that doesn't have it, uh, then yeah, you can. Now there's one I'm seeing Ruth from Waterloo and Ellen's from Kitchener. There is a situation where I have seen all the natural burial grounds that are on our website, but I was speaking to the woman who had launched the one at Waterloo. I mean, I think it was a municipal cemetery in Waterloo, and then she'd sent some pictures, and they looked really, really beautiful. And so then it was on our website, and then flash forward, woman reached out, and her father was dying, and he wanted to be buried naturally, and so they were from KW, so I mentioned Parkview, I think is the name.
Yeah, yeah.
And she went to look at it and she sent me some pictures and she phoned and she was in tears. She said it just looked horrible. And you could just see that it was like there's I guess, a circular road around the cemetery. And then they had this space off the side for whichever reason they couldn't have the conventional burials. And so they said, oh, yeah, let's just call this a natural burial. It had those, chain link fence on the exterior. The equipment shed was right beside it. And she said it was just like so demoralizing. And her father was cremated. It was like always like gut wrenching, just gut wrenching. So there are situations like that. And then there's others where they just care so deeply, like, Picton and Coburg and Willows Rest in Niagara, where it's like a lot of TLC goes into maintaining these sites.
Um, okay, Ruth would like to talk about shroud burials. So, do you want to unmute yourself, Ruth, and ask your question?
Yes, I have arranged with having my burial at the one in Waterloo. And it's a beautiful site that they have with some trees in the background and all that. But the thing is, I wanted to have a shroud. I wanted to do it with a shroud, and they can't because the equipment that has to take you and put you underground has to be able to support its whatever they're carrying, and a loose body just does not work. That's why I have a casket that's made out of wood that dissolves, and there's no metal, there's no glue or anything in the casket, and that's what makes it a natural burial.
I mean, you're absolutely right. You are having a natural burial. And it's tricky because I don't know whether the cemetery that you're referring to is union or not, because that would have
No,
a
it's not
yeah.
union.
But so maybe they'll change their mind because the shroud burial, the video that we're like almost finished putting together and is going to be for the industry, not for the public, for the industry. It goes over all of those concerns. Because there was a situation where there was a funeral home that had never performed a shroud burial. They did the shroud burial. It arrived at the cemetery. It didn't have the proper backing. It was not dignified. And the cemetery operators had to come to the rescue, and hopefully the family didn't see. And by the time they got a whole bunch of twigs and put it under, it looked really natural and beautiful, and the family was thrilled. They didn't know that they had actually just um, tried to hide an emergency. So there's willow trays, there's backboards, there's so many ways that it can be accommodated. And I
Well,
don't know,
it's,
that's not even necessarily the cemetery that's saying no. Okay,
it's
the funeral home that,
Walson.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're just saying because
They say they have to, you have to have it hard. You have to have it hard so that the forklift can get in under there and lift it up and put it in the hole.
God forbid that anybody is lowered with a forklift. That's
Or
horrible.
whatever it is, some kind
No,
of
they
machinery.
do
It's
need
not
to.
human beings with a rope. Put it
It
that
is a
way.
lowering device. It is
Yes.
a lowering device that they were probably using if it's like a big municipal, cemetery.
Right.
And the body goes on that. And yes, the board may go down with that individual and either stay with that individual in the grave,
Okay.
or it goes down on the lowering device and they can just kind of jiggle and the board can come back out. Or yes, so there's ways of doing that. They have to care about doing it. And if they're not like, I mean, the beautiful video that we put together with these funeral directors, like they're just so lovely, and they talk about, we're running into problems all the time. Like we have to be creative. We're always in our jobs finding solutions for whatever the family need is. And so it's just trying to get the funeral directors and funeral homes to think about, okay, this is what the family wants. How can we make this work? Like just thinking a little bit outside the box. Because what's happened is if 95% of people are what they call direct cremation, so that they probably die in the hospital, and then the funeral home collects the body and it goes to cremation retort, and then the family receives the ashes. So it's kind of like it's become a little easier for them. And like that beautiful gang in Ottawa, they're like, this is beautiful. We're back in graveside. We're really helping the family. We can engage the family in the preparation of the body and the wrapping of the shroud. So there's that kind of funeral director. And then it sounds like maybe your funeral home isn't that kind of funeral director. So I really hope, Ruth, that this video that's going to be out within the next like say 2 months, I think I can safely say, um, as they start to see it in the industry. I hope that that the funeral homes will see this as not like a fear that they're going to lose money, but as an opportunity to really help families.
I'm going to call her and talk to the person that I talked to before and see what they think about getting this video anyway.
Well,
Because
it's not out yet.
no, in a
Um,
couple of months,
in a
whenever.
couple months' time, yeah. Or change funeral homes. Like that's the
I
thing.
don't think there's a better one in Kitchener than,
Right.
I just don't think so.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
I see that it's going on. It's just after 2 o'clock.
Oh, yeah.
Uh-oh,
Okay.
So,
sorry.
one more very, very quick question, and that is, do you have a list of funeral homes that are cooperative?
No, it would just be like, yeah, I can't even probably would run into legal problems
Yeah.
there. No, but you know what you do? You phone the good natural burial grounds and they'll tell you. They know who's supportive. That's the way you go backwards.
And I will say that FAMS has a list of, in our membership area of funeral homes, and we're a volunteer organization. So if you find one that is cooperative, please tell FAMS, and we'll put it on our list. Um, so, um, as I said, we're winding down.
I'm
I
gonna
want
say goodbye then.
to suggest that you check out our website, which is fams.ca. Our software is called Wild Apricot, and it has a confidential area for members that you can put your wishes in, so that we will can so that you can keep track, and your family can keep track of what your wishes are, because FAMS no longer keeps paper records of what people are asking for, and the member site of our website. If you have trouble accessing it, please let us know. And it also has links to other services. It has links to Susan's organization and other Green Burial and other relevant organizations. And as I already mentioned, our AGM will be April 26th, which is also a Sunday at 1 o'clock. And the talk will be Consumer Empowerment in the Death Care Industry, Costs, Planning, and Compassion. And the speaker is Beverly McIntosh from the Funeral Cooperative of Ottawa. So I thank you all very much for coming, and we look forward to seeing you at the AGM.
Bye.
Thank you, and I am going to say goodbye and end the meeting. Bye.